Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Butts, Vice Chairman and Senior Advisor at Eurasia Group. We're in the middle of what is known as High-Level Week for the UN General Assembly. In normal times, and these are decidedly not normal times, heads of state and diplomats from 193 countries would be convened right now in New York City. Still, the work of the UN has to continue this year virtually and digitally. I'm thrilled to be joined by Ambassador Kimihiro Ishikane, Japan's permanent representative to the United Nations and former ambassador to my home country, Canada. It's great to see you again, Ambassador, and thank you for joining us. Welcome.
My great pleasure, Jerry.
Ambassador, I'd like to start with the pandemic, which is, of course, front and center in all conversations this week at the UN and everywhere around the world.
Yes.
There's been a lot of criticism of the lack of global coordination during the crisis. How would you rate the pandemic response overall?
Well, we talk a lot about the multilateralism of cooperation, but I think, the cooperation is now, it's a kind of necessity, because one thing which has become very clear, with this corona pandemic is that, no military system, weapons, cannot protect the ordinary people from coronavirus. Security paradigm, based on the military system should be complemented by a human security idea, which put people at the center. And here I think the cooperation is a necessity and must. This is because I think a couple of factors. Number one, it's about the nature of the threat. As many say, no one can be safe until the most vulnerable can be safe. This is the character of this threat. Another character of this, pandemic threat is that it's multifaceted challenge. It's not only about, health crisis. It's not only about economy. It can, having a negative impact upon the society, having negative impact upon the security, stability, and so forth. So when I hear the voice of many, member countries, some say, well, it's because of the sharp decline of foreign direct investment. It's because of, sudden withdrawal of liquidity. It's because of the sharp decline of remittances they are receiving from their foreign workers. Or it's because of the shutting down the tourism on which they are totally dependent. So in coping with this, multifaceted or multidimensional, threats, I think cooperation is a must, a necessity.
Can you talk a little bit about multilateralism and what the COVID-19 crisis means for our multilateral institutions?
Yes, I think the latter narrative, does prevail. Of course, I don't think we can solve this type of, challenges other than, going through the multilateral systems. But you are right in saying that the current multilateral systems did not, function as it expected to be. I think, people are learning, and I think, UN system is getting better than before, and all that sort of cooperation is taking place gradually. But with, the massive, threats which this COVID-19 is presenting to us, and its, huge diversity of threats, I think the current system, multilateral system, is not efficient enough, is not, coordinated enough to handle this, this threat. So what we need to do now is putting the people at the center, and keeping that, human security idea in mind. We need to explore how we can best synergize each players, acting on the ground, and how we can synergize those, up-down, top-down, and bottom-up approach. So I think there's a lot we need to do. And once again, multilateral approach is a must and a necessity, but the current system is not enough. All of us are making all the efforts, but we need to do further. That's my point.
Some have argued that multilateral cooperation is lacking, and that we're seeing too much competition. And that of course, is in the global development, the global race for the development of a vaccine that's happening right now. Yes. How do you feel about the way vaccine development is proceeding? Would you prefer to see a stronger role for the WHO? How do you feel about the COVAX process? Yes. As an example, people are waiting, of course, on the edge of their seat all over the world for the development of a vaccine. How do you feel about how it's going?
Well, As many speakers today we heard at the General Assembly, many said, well, vaccine development and this vaccine fair distribution of vaccines should be a sort of global commons, and I think we agree on that. But as someone who's working for Japanese government, and as someone who's working for Japanese people, of course, each government and a Japanese government has to take care of Japanese people so that they could have a sufficient vaccine for them, and the Canadian government should assure that you have sufficient vaccine for Canadian people. But at the same time, as I said at the very outset, given the nature of the threat, no one can be safe enough until the most vulnerable is safe. We need to think about those vulnerable guys. So that's why the thing which you talked about, ACT accelerator. This is something we are co-proponent under the umbrella of WHO. So within this framework of ACT accelerator, which represent access to COVID-19 tool accelerator, we have decided to contribute to the COVAX facility so that the developing nations could have easier access to the vaccine through Gavi, Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization. So this is one thing which we have in mind. Each of us, all the government first need to take care of our people, but at the same time we need to be very sure that until everyone is safe, no one is safe.
Right, and it sounds like that is the bedrock principle that the Japanese government is guiding its policy by internationally. I've also noticed that you're getting a lot of attention for considering providing free vaccine to all Japanese residents once it's available and approved. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And is that a policy you'd like to see other large countries like the US adopt?
That is a Japanese government policy which has been in place for many years, for a long time. That with regard to a certain type of virus, we need to provide the vaccine to the people, to whole people in Japan, the vaccines. So this is something which is set forward already. It's written down in our regulations, the laws. So this is something we are also pursuing with regard to Japanese people. So this is our system. Yeah.
A lot of people, myself included, I must admit, from the beginning of the COVID crisis, have been concerned that a longer term and perhaps much larger crisis is being supplanted on center stage by COVID, and that is climate change.
Yes.
It's a colossal issue, of course, and one you and I have discussed many times in the past. What do you think it's going to take to see more climate action faster? How do you feel about the COP26 process, and what do you think can be accomplished in these 2 weeks in New York to move the ball?
The process which I am involved in, a process which was initiated by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Prime Minister of Jamaica, is pursuing how we can really build back better from this COVID-19 situations. So, but here again, very easy to say, but very difficult to get things done. Well, I think it's a reality that a huge chunk of money or the resources are now being diverted to the immediate need of dealing with those hospitalized persons and so forth from the other, traditionally important agenda. But there again, climate change is also, as I said at the very outset, this is also a kind of human security threat. Climate change can never be, somehow handled by using military means. This is something, which really put the livelihood of each person in danger. So this is again, huge challenge of to human security, where cooperation is very much needed, and it's a necessity.
One of the aspects of the climate negotiations, or certainly one of the important pieces of the puzzle, is whether or not a constructive engagement can happen between the the United States and China. And of course, second, perhaps only to COVID this year, the rapid deterioration of the relationship between the United States and China is, of course, at the forefront of everyone's mind. Every time as a Canadian, someone says that no country is caught in the middle of this quite like Canada, I of course think of you and Japan. And I wonder if you could give us some reflections on how Japan is approaching the change in the relationship between the United States and China.
The change or the shift of the relative power balance between the United States and China, I believe, does not necessarily lead to a so-called G0 world. I think the G0 world would be a result of the lack or deficiency of a cooperative relation between United States and its allies and partners, because of the inaction on our part. And this inaction or lack of cooperation produce a sort of power vacuum, which are and will be filled by other states with which we do not necessarily share the common value. So as those powers do not share this, not necessarily share the same value or common world standard, that creates a sort of uncertainty or unpredictability, and that leads to a sort of sense of uneasiness. But I think the most important thing for us is, first of all, I don't think we can. China is not the former Soviet Union. Our system is completely intertwined. So I don't think we can completely decouple our economy, and neither it's desirable. I think the best thing is we should find out a sort of constructive protocol of interaction between our side and China, and so that it materializes. And the most important thing is our cooperation and the solidarity between United States and its allies and partners. So I think the deficiency of that is now resulting into that sort of vacuum, emergence of vacuum, which is now filled by the other side. So cooperation, and dialogue.
That's a very interesting perspective. You're saying that you're looking at your traditional allies, my own country included, and saying, folks, we have our own issues to deal with here. It's not necessarily China, the new dimension in the Chinese relationship that is causing our problems. These problems were here because we weren't cooperating enough. Is that a fair summary?
I think, I don't know if that's, official position of Japanese government, but at least it's my perception.
Your longest serving Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, has just recently stepped down for health reasons. Right. And I wonder if you take a moment to reflect on his legacy and perhaps, if any, what changes we can expect under Prime Minister Suga.
Well, I think it's a little bit too early to talk about what kind of changes might take place under Suga administration. For now, especially in terms of diplomacy, for now I think it's a kind of continuity. And I think there are two things. Personally, I perceive there are two things which Prime Minister Abe has done on something I regard very important in the history of Japan. Number one is a sort of kind of institutionalization of security framework in Japan. He has established National Security Council year 2013. And he has passed the legislation of peace and security, which allows us to be more cooperative, to work more actively with the United States and other allies, including Canada. So this is a kind of institutionalization of security framework inside Japan, which did not exist beforehand. And this is extremely important, I believe. And the second aspect is I think he took a certain, kind of leadership in, if I use the word formulating a kind of architecture, it might be I'm going too far, but still, he took leadership, say, in the economic field, in, bringing together the like-minded countries in the form of free trade agreement or economic partnership. like CPTPP, as you know very well.
Of course.
And of course,
that is quite the legacy in and of itself to hold
Japan,
this
EU,
PPP
so
together when
another
after
legacy.
the United States withdrew.
Yes, yes, right. And also another kind of architecture making leadership is he advocated the idea of FOIP, which stands for Free, Open, Indo-Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not a kind of an exclusive idea, excluding someone else, but still the idea is we need to keep this world most vibrant region free, open, and rule-based. So I think that's gathering, many countries which echo this idea, and so these things are apparently a sort of a legacy of Abe diplomacy, and these legacies will continue even as Suga-san.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Ishikane. It is personally a great pleasure to see you again and looking so well. I hope you're enjoying New York. Thank you very much for your time.
Not yet. This, lockdown.
You will, I promise. I promise.
I really miss Canada, Ottawa.
Yeah. Well, when the ambulance passed by or the fire truck or whatever that was, it's a good representation to our viewers that you are indeed in New York in UNGA.
Yes.
So
I feel that
very authentic. And I want to thank our viewers for watching and remind you that you can find all of our UN coverage at gzeromedia.com/UNGA. That's gzeromedia.com/UNGA. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I wish you well. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.